Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by Secretary Henry Cisneros, Assistant Secretary Nick Ratsinas, and Lisa and Spencer Caston.
Mr. President, and to the Caston family, distinguished leaders of homeownership efforts all across America, welcome and thank you for coming to this first annual National Homeownership Summit. Let me begin by thanking the President for being here. Mr. President, we are thrilled and honored that you are here on this important occasion. Let me just say it has been a very long time since a President of the United States put as much time into homeownership and housing issues as President Clinton has done. President, I'd like to acknowledge some of the other panel speakers who will present today on the program. The President of the National Association of Home Builders, Randy Smith, the President of the Enterprise Foundation, Ray Ramsey, the President of the Mortgage Bankers Association, Paul Reed. And also with us are the mayors of Houston, Mayor Bob Lanier, Mayor Norquist of Milwaukee, and Representative Chaka Fattah of Philadelphia. Let us greet all these persons who will be on the program as the day goes along. Mayor. Mr. President, some 18 months ago, standing before the Realtors Convention in Anaheim, California, you directed us to create a strategy to boost home ownership in the United States. After 5 decades of steady increases in the home ownership rate, percentage of Americans who are homeowners, the rate had actually stagnated and decreased during the 1980s. You urged us to reverse that trend, to harness the economic momentum that your economic policies are creating, and to make it work in a way that counts for Americans in home ownership. You said that we should go beyond government programs, government laws, or budgets, and create a working partnership of the private sector and nonprofit groups. And then, Mr. President, exactly 1 year ago yesterday, on June 5th, 1995, in the East Room of the White House, you announced the strategy that that group had put together, the launching of an unprecedented public-private partnership called the National Partners in Homeownership. Never before had all of the elements of America's housing industries, 56 partners, public and private, working with people at all scales of income, come together to work on home ownership. It has proven to be a tremendous rallying moment for us. The home builders, the realtors, the mortgage bankers, the independent bankers, other bankers groups, low-income housing advocates, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Enterprise, LISC, Habitat for Humanity, women's organizations, 56 partners. Today we're recognizing families who are homeowners. Under your leadership, they have managed to get a handhold on the American dream. Families are homeowners because we enjoy low and affordable interest rates that make buying a home easier. And they're homeowners because of the changes in the way that we're doing business in the home building and home owning industries of America. A few of those homeowners are with us today, and I'd like to ask them to stand so that they can, people can know how proud they are to be here. Would all of the families who are here who are homeowners as a result of this partnership effort please stand and be recognized? Thank you. And with us today are more than 1,000 partners from all the elements of the home buying industry, people who care about home ownership. They're from local government, from nonprofit organizations, they're lenders, they're real estate professionals, they're builders, they're developers, they're home buying counselors, they're producers of manufactured homes, they're grassroots advocates, and never before have they been brought together in this fashion to focus on one theme, and that is home ownership. Working together over the course of the last year, we've learned that when the public and the private sectors focus their common energies, they can come up with very good ideas, over 100 ideas on how we can refine and make things more efficient, and great things can happen. There's power in this partnership. Mr. President, it's my pleasure now to introduce to you and to this audience one of the families that was helped by the work of this partnership, Spencer and Lisa Caston of Holland, Michigan. Like many American families, the Castons have worked hard, saved, got a little help from their parents, and they became first-time home buyers in April. Lisa works for a small retail establishment called Picnics and Porches, where she makes and sells gift baskets. And Spencer works with his father in a small plastering business. They're young. Lisa's 24, Spencer's 25. They have no children yet, but now that they have a home, they can begin thinking about things like that. The key to their home purchase was an FHA-insured mortgage that required a very low down payment and permitted closing costs to be financed as part of the mortgage. Everybody chipped in to make the deal work. Their lender was Flagstar Bank. Their realtor was Greenridge Realty. The lender was flexible. The real estate firm reduced its commission. The seller agreed to put in a new furnace, and their parents contributed $1,000 toward the down payment requirements. The property is a small 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 2-story home in a historic neighborhood in Holland, Michigan, and they're going to be spending a lot of their time the next few months further improving this house. But these are classic American youngsters, a young family on the start that is proud of what the President has done in shaping economic statistics and economic policies and all of the things that we read about in the economic literature into something that touches people's lives, literally bringing it all home. Please welcome Lisa Caston, who will introduce the President.
Hi, thank you for inviting me and my husband here. When we bought our house in Holland, Michigan 2 months ago, we never knew that it would end up being a trip to the White House. We are just thrilled to be here. And Spencer and I really aren't experts on the FHA or mortgages or finances. What we do know is that buying a house is a lot of money today. It's hard for a lot of young couples like us to find a home of their own. Even though we both work, we got help from our parents, we couldn't buy a house without an FHA-insured mortgage. It allowed us to finance the down payment, to receive a gift letter for the closing costs, and our home is definitely no mansion, but to us, it is the most beautiful house in the world. So I want to thank you, Mr. President, for your help in making home ownership a possibility for us. Couples like us all around the country will benefit by what you're doing and give them a chance to own their own home as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. 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 Please. Thank you very much. When Lisa was up here talking and she said, you know, when we brought our home, I didn't realize this went along with it. I thought I would. Well, but her husband and I agree that she did so well, she may have a future at this line of work. Didn't you think she did? I thought she... I want to thank all of you for being here, and the other families who are here. I'm sure they could have given a testimonial much like the one that Lisa and Spencer gave. I want to thank the public officials who are here, Congressman Chaka Fattah from Pennsylvania, and Mayor and Mrs. Lanier, Mayor Albano, Mayor Units, Prince George's County Executive, my neighbor, Wayne Curry, and Jefferson County Commissioner David Armstrong, who shares my common roots and home. I want to thank all of you in the private sector who've worked for a year with our national homeownership strategy, and those of you who worked for a lifetime to help people realize the dream of owning their own home. When I became president, I saw this mission of expanding homeownership as part of our larger goal of restoring economic opportunity and a sense of security to Americans who are working hard and trying to build families and raise children. The fact that homeownership had stagnated for several years, to me, was just another indication of why we needed to get our economy moving and working for ordinary people again. I think everybody here, of whatever age, remembers the first home you bought. Actually, I was thinking how much more persuasive Spencer was than I was. He got married first and then bought a home. Some of you heard me tell this story before, but I had to buy a home to get married. Hillary and I had been going together for several years, and we were living in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and we were both teaching at the University Law School, and she was going away on some trip. She was always getting trips to go away on, and I took her to the airport one day. We passed this old house. She said, "Boy, that's a pretty house." I said, "It really is." So I took her to the airport. I went back and checked on the house. It was 1,100 square feet. It cost $20,500. And it was a beautiful little house. No air conditioning, attic fan, hardwood floors. And I bought the house. And I made whatever the down payment was. I remember my mortgage payment was $174 a month. And so 3 or 4 days later, she came back from a trip, and I said, "You remember that house you like so well?" I said, "I bought that house. Now, don't you think you'll have to marry me?" So I wanted to live there by myself. And so I am a living example of the power of home ownership to strengthen families and build better futures. I am very proud of what has been done in the last year. I want to thank Secretary Cisneros and all of the team at HUD. They have done a wonderful job. I don't believe we've ever had a HUD secretary as energetic, as full of good ideas, as able to build bridges, as able to achieve things as Cisneros. We knew if we could get the economy going again, something would happen to homeownership. And in 1993, we began to work on a strategy that would do 3 things. First of all, it would drive the deficit down and therefore get interest rates down. Second, one that would open the world's markets to our products and services so we could get our exports up and create more jobs that were high-wage jobs. And third, one that would invest in the areas that are critical to our long-term growth: the education and training of our people, technology, research, development, our infrastructure. And after 3.5 years, we've got over 8.5 million new jobs. The deficit's gone down now for 4 years in a row. The deficit was $290 billion when I took office. It's projected to be about $130 billion this year. And it's come down a long way. We've had 3 years of record numbers of new small businesses starting, which is something that's very important to our long-term health and well-being. And now we have, in the last 3 years, 3.7 million people like the Castons, new homeowners in America. And I think that's something we can all be proud of. Homeownership is now at a 15-year high, and last year the increase was the highest rate of increase in homeownership in almost 30 years. And one of the things that I also want to point out that I'm very proud of is that homeownership is more broadly distributed now in America than it has been in a long time. There's been a very rapid increase in the number of African-American first-time homeowners, a very rapid increase in the number of Hispanic homeowners, an increase in the number of working women with children who own their own homes now. So we're working hard to broaden the benefits of that, and so many of you are a big part of that. 65% of the American people now own their own homes. Our goal is to go from 3.7 million new homeowners to 8 million new homeowners by the year 2000, bringing us to over 67% of the American people, or 2/3 of the American people in our own homes by the year 2000, the first time that has ever been achieved in the history of this country. Together, you and I, all of us working together, we can achieve that goal, and I think we ought to recommit ourselves to it today. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're trying to do to increase further our role and do our part to work with the private sector on homeownership in the larger context of our obligation to create more opportunities for Americans who are willing to assume the responsibility of working for it to achieve those opportunities. A couple of days ago at Princeton, I went to talk about the idea of making education more accessible to all Americans, and reaffirm my commitment to giving families a $10,000 deduction for the cost of education after high school. And then said, in addition to that, I believe we know enough about the world economy to know that a high school education is not a guarantee of a good job with a growing income, and therefore we should make 2 more years of education available to every American by giving a tax credit of $1,500 for the 13th and 14th year for people who need it. So that will take every American and open the doors of community college to every single American who needs it. And I think we ought to do that. I think it's very important. I recommend it because I think it's good policy and because it's consistent with what we can afford and still balance the budget, that anybody be able to get the $1,500 the first year to go back to community college, and then they get it the second year if they maintain a B average. I believe that if the taxpayers are going to pay for it, to make this, to in effect make it 14 years of public schooling, but do it through tax credits, that we ought to give it to people who are really working hard and trying to do their part as well. So I hope all of you will support that and get behind it. We can do the same sorts of things with home ownership. Anybody who's willing to take the risk and who can make the mortgage payments to buy their own home, it seems to me we ought to do what we can to help. Besides that, it's not all that easy to own your own home. Not all of us are plasterers like Mr. Caston here. Anybody who's ever been up at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to fix a pipe sometimes probably has second thoughts about whether they did the right thing in the first place. But this country has for most of this century, has had a commitment to home ownership. And we've understood that home ownership was about more than a statistic. It was about growing the entire economy. It was about increasing the savings rates of Americans. It was about stabilizing the forces of family and child rearing and strengthening communities. That it was a big, big issue. President Roosevelt and the Congress understood that in creating the FHA way back in 1934. When they recognized that out-of-work families losing their homes because they couldn't keep up with payments was a long-term disaster for the United States, for more than the families losing their homes. They realized that letting people buy their own homes was the best way to make sure that they had a stake in our system and in our future. That's what the nationally backed mortgage system of insurance did. And thanks to the FHA and the GI Bill's VA home guarantee, for the first time in 1948, for the very first time in the entire history of America, the majority of Americans own their own homes. What we are doing today is simply building on a 50-year commitment to continue to enhance that. In the 1980s, what happened was our country got so concerned with short-term gains that we were willing to sacrifice a lot of long-term interests to those short-term gains. The big deficits that came about in the 1980s paid for some short-term economic growth, but at the cost of very, very high interest rates, which put the brakes on home ownership. And we have been working, as I said, for 3 years to reverse those trends. It's looking pretty good. One of the first things I noticed that came about after we announced and then enacted the deficit reduction plan in 1993, and we had a big reduction in interest rates, was that people began to refinance their homes. So many people were on variable rate mortgages, they could do that. We believe that in 1993 alone, 5.5 million families refinanced their home loans in a way that saved them an average of more than $1,000 a year in payments. That was a stunning indicator to me that something was going right in this direction, and we needed to continue to do more of it. That is, by the way, why we will, in this budget, continue to bring the deficit down, and why we ought to pass a balanced budget plan, because that's the best guarantee to keep the interest rates down while we grow the economy. And over the long run, keeping that kind of environment will guarantee, more than anything else we can do, the availability of affordable home ownership to the American people. So I hope all of you will continue to support us as we find ways to bring the deficit down and balance the budget and still meet our fundamental commitments to bring this country together and to help those who need it. Let me also say that we tried to focus on what it would take to get from here where we are with 3.7 million to 8 million homeowners. And we've asked for all of your help in the partnership that you're a part of with Secretary Cisneros and others in our administration. One of the things that we focused on was, and that all of us can remember from our own experiences, I think, when we first started to buy a home, is how much it cost in front-end cost. We found that one of the biggest barriers to young families buying homes was not the monthly mortgage payments, but the upfront cost. They averaged about $4,400 a year. And so I challenged FHA to do what it could over the next year to cut those costs by $1,000. For a lot of us who maybe have more yesterdays than tomorrows, that may not seem like a lot of money. But for these folks, that's a lot of money to come up with at one time. And I want to thank FHA for the work they've done to meet the challenge I gave them to reduce the front-end cost of closing on a home by $1,000. In 1994, FHA cut its upfront mortgage insurance premiums by 25%. That was the first $600 on their $1,000 goal. Then, over the next year or two, since 1994, FHA has been streamlining, consolidating its offices, cutting red tape, putting offices online, speeding up the process. Sometimes its turnaround has gone from as long as 60 days to as short as 2 days in the best places. And they're working very hard to implement these reforms throughout the country. As these changes go throughout the country, they will save, literally in the time, $200 per customer. So that takes us to $800. We have one more step to make to get to $1,000. And I've directed the FHA to further reduce the upfront mortgage premiums by another 25 basis points, which amounts to $200 and which can be easily funded in our balanced budget plan. It doesn't cost a lot of money. But this will enable FHA to say, okay, we did it. With the 1994 cut, with this cut, with the streamlining, we will cut average closing costs from $4,400 to $3,400 to try to make the dream of homeownership more achievable to young, hardworking people so they can get off to a good start. Now, let me also put in one plug here on an issue that's kind of hot around town now. because I think it's the wrong way to promote home ownership. There are some people who say that we should just privatize the FHA altogether, and that if we, by selling off an agency that's made the American dream of homeownership real for almost 25 million Americans, without costing a dime, somehow that will reduce the housing costs for America's families. That's not so. If we just ended FHA's loan guarantees, we know that one thing would happen. Interest rates would go up. The mortgage rates would increase. Families now eligible for FHA loans would pay hundreds of dollars more a year in mortgage payments. That would be like a significant tax increase for people buying homes. As many as 400,000 families could be denied mortgages altogether who would otherwise be eligible to get them. So I believe this would be a mistake. This is you can call it a subsidy, as the critics do. I say it's a pretty good subsidy. It's a pretty good investment by the American people as a whole to get 2/3 of us into our own homes. I think it's a pretty good investment for people like me who could afford to pay market mortgage rates, to help young people like the Castons get started and raise their kids, afford a home, be good citizens, and build a future. I believe it's worth doing. So let me say again, I'm committed to reducing the deficit. I'm committed to reducing the size of government. I'm committed to get rid of programs we don't need. We've eliminated hundreds of programs in the last 3 years. There are 237,000 fewer people working for the federal government than there were the day I took the oath of office. 237,000. And I might say we have the smallest federal government since 1965. By the end of the year, it will be the smallest it's been since President Kennedy was in office. As a percentage of our overall civilian workforce, the federal government today is as small as it was in 1933 before the New Deal. We don't have to get rid of the FHA to shrink the size of the federal government. But we can do this. We can do this in the right way. I bet most of you probably didn't know that. And one reason you probably don't know it is, I'm very proud of this, of the 237,000 people who have left the federal employment since I became president, fewer than 2,000 were separated involuntarily. We tried to take care of those folks and honor their service and recognize that they had to go on with their lives and they needed to find other jobs, they needed to do other work, or they needed to move gracefully into retirement. So we have tried to handle this in a humane way. But I say this to make the point again. We need to keep our eyes on the major things here. The major thing is to keep the deficit coming down and go into balancing the budget. To do it in a way that enables us to honor our obligations to our children and our parents and families with children with disabilities and to others who need help. And to do it in a way that grows the economy while preserving the environment. And that helps people, like the families we honor today, to build a good future for themselves and their kids. We can do these things. And I will say one more time, we got a lot of work to do, even with all these efforts, to get from 3.7 million in 1996 to 8 million in 2000. But we can do it. I want to have 8 million Americans able to say two of the most beautiful words in the English language, welcome home, by the year 2000. And with your help, that's exactly what we're going to do. Thank you, and God bless you.